Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the session on practical pathways to localizing aid and our central question, can thinking and working politically, or TWP, help distinguish appropriate opportunities and approaches? The session is sponsored on behalf of the TWP community of practice. I am Laura Zambrano. I'm the Chief of Party for the USAID Colombia Human Rights and Migration Activity, Conectando Caminos por los Derechos, and I will moderate the session in which we will explore how thinking and working politically, practices and mindsets can help implementers advance key goals related to localization. Most of you are familiar with TWP, but for the purposes of this panel, we are referring to the effort by development practitioners to identify, understand, and respond to the underlying social, political, and economic interests and incentives that help influence a local system. With me are three speakers whom I will introduce separately as we have pre-recorded their participation. And while each of them mention various tools, such as the applied political economy analysis, please keep in mind that TWP is not just a tool, rather a way of approaching development programming. In their section, each of the speakers discusses various ways in which TWP supported their program efforts to identify, engage with, and empower specific local actors, or the local system as a whole, which are key aims of any broad understanding of localization. As you watch the three presentations, I encourage everyone to think about your questions and your own personal experiences related to how TWP can bolster and advance locally led development approaches. This is something that we would like to explore a little bit further in the Q&A session that follows. So let's start with Caterina Valero. She is the Chief of Party for the Honduras Justice, Human Rights, and Security Strengthening Activity Unidos. Let's hear from Caterina. I can't hear. We don't have audio, Elijah. Could you try this again? Still no audio on this end.
In September 2016. It was originally a 5-year long project, but has been extended through February 2023. Unidos is implemented by DAI Global, and the project has 3 focus areas. 1, improving citizen engagement with the security and justice sectors. 2, improving the efficiency of justice and security systems. And 3, increasing the effectiveness of citizen security. A recent important contextual consideration is that the country held election in November 2021, and the left-wing Liberty and Refoundation Party defeated the right-wing Nationalist Party, which had been previously in power for several years. This result has had a huge impact on Unidos' work with its partners, many of whom are government agencies, the judiciary, the public ministry, police. The change in government meant that we have had to work hard to establish new relationships with the new actors and make sure to be judicious in following up our priorities and our contract. It has really made a use of TWP that much more important on the project. Put simply, Unidos is a complex project, and for implementation to be successful, it is crucial to understand the interplay between the different actors that the project works with. The regional program design incorporates various TWP principles, but most specifically, a way of working that involves facilitating, convening, and brokering partnerships and spaces for collective action based on long-term engagement. Also because so many of our activities rely on cooperation with government agencies, we need to think creatively and also be nimble in our decision making, because any changes, notably the recent change in government, have immediate implications on our plan implementation. Both the PEA process as well as the TWP principles allow us to map out our actions and better help us to be responsive to changing circumstances. And contractually, we conduct a PEA every year. So we were used to this process. However, in our most recent PEA, we look to apply TWP principles even more broadly. It has entailed continuous analysis of ways to enhance the impact of implementation, a more detailed description and mapping of the actors that we engage with and the sectors that we work in, and in even deeper analysis of our activities that can be so to be more responsive to changing contexts. The PEA and the TWP allow us to consider all of these factors, and they continue to impact work planning conversations that we have on the continuous basis. Given that a successful application of TWP means developing knowledge of local actors and power dynamics, applying TWP naturally meant that we, as a project, had to gain an in-depth understanding of local systems and the interplay between the actors and the institutions with which we work. TWP has guided us and pushed us to ensure that our relationships with our partners help us extend our impact. One example of this is the alliances we have created with community leaders. Our conversations with them help us better understand the needs of our target communities and inform the implementation that what we can do to better serve the residents of those communities. These alliances were also crucial at the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, as the community leaders with which we work help us deliver PPE to those who most needed it. TWP thinking dictates that implementation is guided by strategic and pragmatic consideration that are based on what exists and best fit solutions that are guided by political feasibility and technical soundness. This may mean, for example, that we form partnerships with more established organizations where progress on a certain issue is more urgent in order to ensure rapid implementation. On the other hand, when an implementation objective is more long-term, the project will more intentionally engage with a growing organization in order to provide capacity building and support. In this way, the objectives of the project and apply TWP thinking to influence the project's decision making in a way that can impact local dynamics. We're very intentional in making sure that our activities both empower local actors and ensure that USAID investments are sustainable. One of many examples of what I mean by this is how we have applied TWP to the work we do on gender-based violence. Because GBV prevention is a priority for both the US and Honduran governments, we as a project saw a window of opportunity in the political to combat gender-based violence and have leveraged that into the activities that we are doing. This includes, for example, supporting the women's movement for the Colonia Lopez Arellano and surroundings, MOMUCLA, an organization that provides services to women survivors of GBV in the northern Honduras. We know that our investment in capacity building for their staff and physical improvements, non-structural, but to that office will help them continue to help the women that they serve for the years to come. There is a specific document that is a good representation of our work with TWP and how it is influencing the USAID Honduras. Every month, UNIDOS produces a situational analysis for USAID. This document began as an assessment of COVID-19 in Honduras, when the pandemic first reached the country, but it has since developed into an in-depth analysis of all of the areas in which UNIDOS works, including violence, the justice systems, police activity, corruption, and migration. Our project staff works together with an independent consultant to gather statistics and information on these topics. And based on the information, we provide analysis, which is based on TWP principles about the implications of this information. But our COR recently told us that the mission uses this document every month to help in its decision-making processes.
Yeah. So something that really resonated with me about Caterina's intervention was how she mentioned how partnerships were crucial at the onset of COVID-19 and how TWP really helped UNIDOS to develop a deeper understanding of the local actors and the power dynamics. And some of you are familiar with USAID's definition of localization, which is that development work is more effective, more resilient, and more equitable when local partners play a leading role in identifying sectors, planning programs, implementing projects, and evaluating progress. And it was our experience too in Colombia that COVID-19 really made us rely heavily on those local actors who were our eyes and ears in target communities at a time when we really couldn't even leave the house. But we had commitments to the donor, obviously, and more importantly, communities were suffering and we really needed to mobilize support quickly. Let's move on now to our second speaker, Adanu Oyigocho. He is Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager for USAID Nigeria's Building Community Resilience to Violent Extremism and Conflict in Northeast Nigeria. Let's see his presentation.
The activity is titled the Nigeria Northeast Connection Program, Building Community Resilience to Violent Extremism and Conflict. It is currently being implemented in the Northeast region of Nigeria, which we know is the hotspot of VEO activities and have experienced over a decade-long conflict, which has affected the fabric of the entire society. So the activity is specifically focused in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states. We call them the Bay states, with coverage across 15 local government areas, 30 wards, and over 90 communities. So the program aims to strengthen community resilience to violent extremist infiltration and conflict, and also to develop local capacity to respond to emerging threats and vulnerabilities. And this we do at the individual, organization, and at the community level. So the program has a very robust collaboration, learning, and adaptive component, research, analysis, and coordination as component 2 of the program, with different research that fits into program design and implementation. So we have the quarterly conflict analysis, we have the quarterly VEO recruitment tactics, then we have the community vulnerability survey, we have the quarterly political economic analysis, and we have the social network analysis. All these different research components have been helping the program to better understand local system, power dynamics between and amongst the different actors, both the community, the government, and the traditional institution, all working within the context of the Northeast. So it has given us a broader perspective in thinking and working politically. So this has helped us in strategizing on our program approach and also coming up with methods and strategies that would ensure critical reflection on the context, connecting research with the program, and also building the capacity of the program team to keep track of the changes in dynamics as it relates to the area, their specific areas of operation. So we had to initiate different sessions within the program or forums or fora that will bring the different teams together so we can, on a weekly basis, look at these issues critically. So we initiated the weekly brainstorming session. In this session, the different team members come together to reflect and think about changes in dynamics, changes in context, changes in government policies, critically scanning the context to identify windows of opportunity, reflecting on our program approach, if we're making progress or if we're having challenges, reviewing and reflecting on our assumptions of the program theory of change and the changes we've observed to ensure that we're thinking and working politically, to ensure that we're integrating the do no harm principles and also providing a roadmap for potential intervention that ensures that we review how actors participate in, view our intervention, recognize our intervention, accept our intervention, how they relate with our partners in the community. So this has helped us to track shifting power dynamics, identify emerging opportunities and constraints, such as government policies. So we do the pause, reflect, and adapt sessions in 3 layers. We have a session at the community level where we conduct focus group discussion with key community members to identify how the program is being recognized within the context, the willingness of the community to partner, the outcome they are seeing from our intervention, how they perceive our intervention. Then we relate that with the approach the different partners are using in intervening. Then we come back to meet with our different partners to review what they are doing, the challenges they are experiencing, the successes they're seeing, and what they think we need to do to improve on our approach. Then all the issues identified at the community and at the CSO level are taken into the Northeast Connection level, where we meet on a quarterly basis to reflect and adapt some of those observations from the field, because we have the SMT present in the session. So this has helped us to strategize, to adjust our intervention, identify stakeholder group and actors that will be mobilized to maximize the outcome of the program and ensure sustainability of our different interventions. We have the learning series where we present the findings from the different research components to critical stakeholders. That's the CSO and the mission. Our COR and the mission directors and the ambassador from the embassy sometimes attend some of our learning series. So the key outcomes we're seeing right now is our intervention, the types of intervention we're designing, the complexities of our intervention, and the approaches we're developing at the organizational level to ensure that our interventions are more impactful. So we adopted, one of the key outcomes of that is adopting the co-creation, which I consider from the male perspective as the most effective tool for adaptive management. Because during co-creation, we bring the stakeholders, the prospective grantee, and he works hand in hand with our partner, with our team at Northeast Connection. We collectively define the concept. And because we present our findings from the different research to the different program team, they are aware of what we're seeing from the community, and they tend to impute that into the concept. So it becomes a binding document that the grantees use in implementing activities at the community level. So this has influenced our program in several ways. It has helped in influencing the mission and their decisions, like in identifying rapid response activity. Because when we scan, when we reason in the perspective of government policies, changes in government strategy, then we get their buy-in, we get their recognition, and we get their support, which in my experience has helped in successful implementation of the program. I would say we're seeing how this program has succeeded in influencing the mission by approving some of our direct rapid response activity and giving us the go-ahead to implement these activities. And we're seeing how important our research and analytics component is to the mission. Thank you very much.
Christian also mentions how TWP tools help them understand how the program is perceived by communities and local partners in Nigeria, helping them identify which strategic actors to mobilize and, for example, which rapid response activities they should pursue. Our third speaker is Eva Matsiko. She is Senior Technical Advisor at RTI International. She will share her experience with the Governance, Accountability, Participation and Performance Program in Uganda.
So the project was Governance, Accountability, Participation and Performance Program. It was a project in Uganda working on strengthening the local governance and accountability system. So we're working with different local governments, but also national level organizations that provide oversight to local governments and helping them increase their oversight for these local governments. We were working with a number of counterparts at the same time. And during that period, on one of our annual pause and reflect retreats, we incorporated sessions on PEA, on political economy analysis for staff in general. Now, unknown to the facilitator at the time, we were struggling with one of our partners who, in spite of many different interventions we made, we couldn't, that institution had oversight for a number of other institutions. And if it worked, it meant that all the other institutions got support, received leadership, and if it didn't work, if that institution was not functioning properly, everybody else struggled within the system. But we tried many different avenues, talking to leadership, finding focal persons to help us kind of get the institution excited about reforms that were happening in the local governance system, but with little success. So after we'd received the training, we said, why don't we do this within this institution and figure out what actually is going on beneath the surface? Why aren't senior managers not as excited about what's going on, what's happening with local government? Why don't they support them as they should? What's really going on? And that's when we're introduced to practical PEA. We actually implemented one. And thereafter, it changed the way we engaged with that institution. We understood that there was a lot more going on beneath the surface. We understood that some were long-standing problems that needed help to be addressed from other counterpart agencies. And we chose at that point to, some were even beyond our mandate, to link up with other agencies to come and support this institution. Because we realized that unless those issues were addressed, that institution would never perform efficiently. One of the things is looking out for champions and blockers. One of the tools, one of the methods you use. And as we began to more quickly look out for these kinds of people within institutions and know that if we engage them, our chances of success are faster than if we try to just approach a department en masse, just approach an institution. But if you went in with the mindset of, okay, who are likely to be champions for this and why? And so what are their incentives and how can I tap into them to help them, to help this cause and to help them achieve what they want? So for example, there was an annual local government assessment, performance assessment that happened every year in Uganda. And local governments were assessed on how efficiently, how they performed on a number of fronts. Now, it was in the interest of chairpersons and accountants, that their local governments worked well, that they shone on that score. So so we understood that was their incentive. They may not have been so keen about financial reforms, accountability reforms, and all those things. But when we understood the incentives and why, we piggybacked on that particular assessment process and said, look, you were number 38 last year. How do we get you up to? What do you need to tell your team? We got energy by tapping into what they were really interested in. And over time, that gave us mileage. Because we were working in those 40 districts I mentioned, we had embedded technical teams based within the regions. And their job was to support 8 or 9 districts on different fronts. And the actual realities in each district is very different. Who the supporters are and who wants to block what is different. So they needed to wear this hat on a daily basis and say, in this district, I need to talk to the chief financial officer and the chairman. In the next district, I'll need to talk to the treasurer. And so the people changed all the time, but they had to have this hat for them to be effective. One of the areas that we worked on was around accountability, as I mentioned. And it had a number of partners. It had parliament, which were members of parliament, it had civil society, it had the local governments themselves that would receive the funds. So there was a system, an accountability system right from the center, which releases the money to the community, to the local governments, to the community who receives services, and backwards. So what we try to do is look at the interests of each of those parties, and by using that, strengthening how accountability happened at the local government. And one of the ways that we did that was through a tool that the tripartite hearings, whereby hearings were held, but at some point we stepped back and Parliament took the lead because this was within their mandate and it was something they wanted to do. And it changed the way it related with local governments, changed the way the local governments related with civil society. And we did actually step back because there was now, between Parliament and the local governments and the civil society, they each had interests they wanted to achieve. They had objectives they wanted to achieve, and they went ahead and did it with their own resources. One key lesson for me was that if you have this mindset as you approach any project or any work or any problem, right going in, it will help you, as I said to someone earlier, that it will help you not lose 2 hours of project, 2 years of project life, because you tried some things and they don't work, and try others and they don't work, and try others and they. But if you have a deeper definition of actually what's going on, you're able to start much earlier addressing it than hitting several roadblocks over the years and frustrations, and then figuring it out in year 3, and you're left with 2 more years for implementation.
Thank you, Eva. I really liked your reference to helping, to applying a mindset to helping local institutions achieve their own goals, and how it helped you mobilize that agenda of accountability, which otherwise some counterparts would not have been too excited about. Well, thank you to our 3 speakers for sharing your experiences. I'd like to move on to some questions so that we can dive a little bit deeper into the understanding of the links between TWP and localization in each context. We have both Eva and Christian here, as well as Jesse Schneider, who is sitting in for Caterina. He is a program manager for Unidos Honduras. I'd like to start us off with the first question. In the experience of the program that I manage in Colombia, TWP really aligned these approaches. It was very, very important to use them to help define the parameters of the local system that we were working in and identify specific actors that we needed to engage. And each of you described similar uses for approaches like APEAs in your own projects. Can you explain in a couple of minutes how applying thinking and working politically approach allowed you to work with or engage with actors you may not otherwise have done so? Let's start with Christian. Do you want to start?
So thank you very much. Can I share my video? Or I should just go ahead and...
If your bandwidth allows, go ahead. If not...
Okay, I think I have a poor network here. So the political economic analysis, ours is done quarterly, just like I said in the video. We do it quarterly. It's because we're working in a hotspot where the environment rapidly evolves. So we need to constantly scan the context and see if the actors we're initially working with are still relevant, because the actors changes. There's this frequent changes in the actors we engage with. Usually, the government actors usually change the local governments. In Nigeria here, we have the state government, we have the local government, and we have the community level. We call them the councillors. So usually the local government actors are elected, but the government, that's the state government, don't usually keep them there. Whenever there's any political change, they automatically drop the local government actors And same with the community level actors, that's we call them the councillors. So within the space where they are dropped, before new ones are appointed to take their space, there's this vacant, there's a gap between the actors that makes decision at the local government level, because you need to make the government aware of whatever you're doing. If you're implementing an activity, the local government actors, that's the local government chairmen, are always aware of how activities are implemented and what we're doing in their areas of jurisdiction, so they can go to the state level and inform the governor who presides over the state. So when we conducted the political economic analysis, we now realized that the community members do not really recognize the local government as key actors. Yeah, for recognition, it's okay, but they align more with the informal actors, like the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, and the community leaders who are found in the hinterlands, because the local government level is within the metropolis of the community. So we have hinterlands, communities that are 6 hours away from the metropolis, that have never had access to government or are not benefiting from anything the government is doing. So they tend to align more with the informal actors, like the religious leaders, the traditional leaders, and also their community leaders. So when we did the political economic analysis, we did a scan of the justice system. And findings from the study now reveal to us that these formal actors are more recognized. They are more accepted at the community level. So why not align with them to participate in the program activities? So that's when we worked with our grantees. We held a meeting with our grantees and encouraged them to begin to use those local community actors. And they started using them, and we started seeing results, because they became members of the platform and they are willing to participate. They are willing to stick their neck out, going to other communities, using their own personal funds, because it gives them power, it gives them recognition, and it enables the people to accept them. That is the power dynamics we didn't know in the first instance, but we realized that through the political economic analysis that mapped out those actors that are relevant, and the symbiotic relationship between those actors at the local level and those actors at the community level. Thank you,
Christian. And for the audience, I forgot to mention that Christian and Eva might keep their screen off because of bandwidth issues, but thank you for participating. And Christian, you're right, so important about especially the rural populations. I think also COVID-19 taught us that there are a lot of communities that are not in the grid, and how important it is to reach out to them as well. Jesse, would you like to comment on this question as well?
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. So as Caterina mentioned in the video on our project, we conduct a PEA each year in order to have a clear idea of the local actors with whom we'll be working, any contextual concerns that may influence implementation. PEA principles also call for adaptive management. And as a project, we certainly had to apply this adaptation after the 2021 presidential election, which again was mentioned in the video. It entailed a shift from a center-right party to a socialist party. But as a project, our philosophy in the face of this type of change has always been to look for windows of opportunity. Gender-based violence was mentioned as one of those windows. Another window of opportunity we had in the wake of this most recent election was the administration's more friendly posture towards LGBTQI+ rights. So this allowed us to more actively engage in helping LGBTQI+ CSOs with which we work to conduct advocacy for trans people to be able to use their chosen name rather than their given name on their national identity document. So, perhaps this is more an example of engaging in a different way with local actors, exploring different opportunities, and also just empowering them to advocate for their human rights. Another exercise that I wanted to mention quickly that we did right after the new administration took power is we held a work planning meeting with our entire staff to discuss the changed context in light of this new presidential administration. We brought in our whole project team. We also brought in 2 consultants with which we had worked for a long time to really dive deeply into what the change in administration would mean in the change in priorities in the areas in which we work. So this exercise, I think an additional exercise, was really crucial for us to be on the same page as a project team and to understand how we might have to refocus some of our objectives or do things a little bit differently in light of this new administration.
Great, thank you, Jesse. Eva, there's a question from the audience, and that I think that's something that we all kind of struggle with. They're mentioning that they have a certain tool that they use, the stakeholder engagement, but that they kind of find it difficult to keep that document alive throughout the implementation of the whole program. How can they keep like this information and this approach built into the work so that it's almost like second nature? Can you comment on that?
Yes. I think of like 4 things. One is spaces within the program life where the program team does these times of reflection and saying, what does this mean? And actually embedding it in their work plan. So you've got to make the switch. You have to not just think about it, but actually make the switch. So spaces, times, they can be monthly, quarterly, but that depends on, what kind of program it is and with whom it's working. So first one is spaces. The second one is almost more nimble. It's like permission. People need to feel, the people we lead and work with need to feel that they are free to think and create and even work outside the box, that if they come up with a new idea, it can actually be implemented if it's proven to be robust and sufficient. So there's permission. There's got to be permission within the team that they can change, they can be more nuanced, they can do things a little differently. And that, as the more they do that, the more they get encouraged to do it more. The third one, I think, is finance. You need to, some of these changes cost. So is there some wiggle room in the way the program is designed to allow you to make those adaptations? If there's no wiggle room, then people are always coming up against a block every time. Oh yes, this would be nice to do, but, or this would be nice to do, but however. So we need to have that wiggle room in terms of finances that allow us to make those adaptations. And I think it's like a wheel, as momentum is gained over time, that wheel begins to flow naturally. And the last one is skills. The team need to have the skills. They need to know what this is about first. Initially, it will be more rigid. It may be more structured, but then after some time of using it and thinking this way, it will become more natural, just like any skill we acquire in our professional life. I think those are my 4 suggestions.
Thank you, Eva. And if I can add a couple of points to that, one is certainly the design of the tool is critical so that the answers that we get are really being able to be used, throughout the life of the program. And I agree completely with you, Eva. As we keep talking about these tools and the approach and the mindset with the program, it gets a little bit easier. At least for us, certainly our MEL team has been fantastic in kind of getting all that information, because there is so much information and really grounded in the activities and in the program design that we have each year. Now, I really wanted to ask this question, and I say this from experience too, that sometimes the TWP concepts can feel abstract and jargonized for local partners and communities, even sometimes for us implementers on the ground. And also as practitioners, we might approach TWP as something to be done to local partners rather than done with those partners. So in your experience, how can we localize TWP? I don't know, for example, you mentioned the importance of co-creation. Are there other ways that you've been able to engage local actors and partners to better lead TWP approaches? Jesse, would you like to start?
Sure. So I think for this, I'd like to talk a little bit about how we define localization on Unidos, and then a specific example of an activity that we've done that I think is a great example of this. So first, we think about localization as tailoring implementation in such a way that local actors are empowered to continue reform efforts beyond the life of the project, but also to ensure that those local actors are then empowered to work with a broader network of actors to facilitate change. So I think this points really directly to the TWP principle of a way of working that goes beyond just providing technical assistance in a finite time frame and facilitating partnerships between a wide range of actors. So the example that I wanted to share of how I believe we're doing this is through two grants we have that are called Communities of Practice for Access to Justice grants that we have with two local organizations, the Center for Human Rights Research and Promotion, or CIPRODE as it's known here, and Integrated Women and Family Development Unit, or UDIMUF. So these are two local organizations that helm these communities of practice, which bring together civil society advocates, government officials, and justice operators to discuss barriers that each entity has in advancing access to justice. And it was for us, before undertaking this, crucial to bring everyone together, because what we saw before is that they weren't really, the separate entities weren't really speaking to each other, and they didn't have a strong understanding of the difficulties that they face. So being able to bring them together, being able to empower CIPRODE and UDIMUF to lead these discussions, we see as a good example of both empowering local organizations through the grant, which is of course a finite time period, but also taking that empowerment forward and helping local actors make long-term changes in access to justice.
Thanks, Jesse. And that's taking it even a step further. And thanks for that, for those examples with some of our grantees and how translating all this language to them is crucial as well. Christian, I know that, you know, localization can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Can you help us with your own definition of the objectives of localization? And very briefly, how would you say that TWP helped you make progress towards those localization objectives?
Okay, thank you very much. So for our program, we define localization from the perspective of participation and capacity building, because we find ourselves in a region. We're working in a region where the government makes the decision. Decision is from top to bottom, not from the bottom to top. So we define localization as participation that's involving the communities at the hinterlands in planning, designing, and in the implementation of our activities. And secondly, we look at it from the perspective of capacity building. So our program has one of the major objectives of our program is to develop local capacity to respond to emerging threats and vulnerabilities. And this we do through capacity building at the individual level, at the community level, and at the organizational level. So that's why we have so many capacity building components integrated into our program design. So because the program has different research components, so we integrated data collection. We conducted research like community mapping. What we did was, in the selection of the communities, were not selected by the program team, but were selected by the community members. So they take ownership. So we're trying to localize the program. They take ownership because they participated in the selection of the communities. So here we held a facilitated workshop where different community members were selected from the local government areas, where we intend to work in 2 wards and 6 communities. So what we did, we brought all the community members across the 10 wards in the local government area. They all came together in a workshop, and we asked them, we presented the criteria for our program communities, and they came together collectively, irrespective of their individual sentiments, and picked communities that are more vulnerable based on the criteria we presented to them. And they said, if you want to achieve this goal, you want to achieve this purpose, work within these communities. And that is how we identified our communities of intervention. And how did we arrive at this? It is through our first political economic analysis. The feedback we got from the first political economic analysis we conducted was that community members said different stakeholders, different development partners come to the community to interview them, but they don't see anything. They are no longer interested in being interviewed again. And even when the project comes, it doesn't come to their community directly. They are not benefiting directly. So we felt, okay, why not adopt this strategy of communities, identifying the communities, carry them along in the design and the implementation of the activities so they can own the activity. And right now, what we're seeing is communities are now setting up platforms on their own without funding from Northeast Connection Program, even outside our program selected communities, because they're trying to replicate what they participated in the workshop that identified the communities of intervention. And now they're beginning to see successes in those communities. So they are replicating same in neighboring communities. That's one aspect of participation. So in the implementation of...
sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off. We have 1 more minute left.
Okay.
Thank you for that example. Eva, do you have a few very, very short ideas before we leave, before we wrap up?
Yeah, just to also say that when we are thinking localization, sometimes it's our teams that need to be localized. You know, the community many times knows or understands the nuances of those issues, but sometimes we don't understand them as well. So as we are talking about, you know, investing in our partners to understand how PEA works and what PEA is, sometimes it's our teams that need to understand the context better. I think that's the additional comment I wanted to make.
Thank you, Eva. And thank you so much to all 3 of you and to everyone that participated in putting this together. Time flies really quickly. And thank you also for me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we've seen in Colombia with thinking and working politically. Have a great afternoon, everyone.